This section isn't for people like you. Security will escort you to economy where you belong. The words sliced through the first-class cabin of Pacific Airways Flight PA-482 like a blade through silk. Sharp, deliberate, final. Every conversation stopped. Every smartphone paused mid-scroll. Every passenger's gaze snapped toward seat 1A, where a black man in his early 40s sat with the kind of stillness that comes from a lifetime of facing moments exactly like this one. Sarah Collins, the lead flight attendant, stood over him with her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to sharpen every angle of her face. Her smile was thin as paper brittle with the confidence of someone who believed she was handling the right person in precisely the right way. Before we dive deeper into this story, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe in fair skies for every passenger, tap that subscribe button. The man she was addressing, Damon Mitchell, wore a simple navy polo shirt, dark jeans, and leather sneakers that had seen better days. His laptop bag rested quietly beside his feet. There was nothing about him that screamed wealth, nothing that announced he was the CEO of Mitchell Technology Solutions, a company that generated $2.8 billion in annual revenue. Nothing that revealed he employed over 12,000 people, or that his software literally kept Pacific Airways reservation systems operational. And that was exactly the point. Damon was conducting what he privately called a culture audit. For months, disturbing reports had filtered up to his executive team about passenger treatment disparities across the airlines that used his technology platforms. Reports that suggested appearance rather than ticket class determined service quality. Reports that his legal team had filed away but never acted upon. Tonight, he was seeing it firsthand. The Boeing 707's first-class cabin hummed with the low energy of departure preparation. Flight PA-482 from Los Angeles International to JFK was scheduled to depart at 8:15 p.m., but the boarding process had already fallen behind due to what the gate agents called passenger verification issues. What they really meant was profiling. Sarah's fingers drummed against her tablet as she waited for Damon to respond. Behind her in seat 1B, Ryan Thompson stretched his legs and adjusted his platinum status luggage tag with the casual arrogance of someone accustomed to being catered to. Ryan was a private equity executive whose portfolio had been hemorrhaging money for 18 months, though his ego remained fully inflated. "I specifically requested privacy," Ryan announced to no one in particular, his voice carrying the assumption that everyone within earshot both cared about his preferences and would act accordingly. "I assume this will be resolved quickly." From across the aisle, Sophia Martinez, a 26-year-old travel blogger, watched the interaction unfold with growing unease. Her phone was already in her hand, not for entertainment, but because every instinct told her she was about to witness something that needed documenting. Sophia had built her following by showcasing the realities of air travel, but nothing had prepared her for what she was seeing now. 2 rows behind Tyler Anderson, a 24-year-old tech startup founder, recognized Damon immediately. Tyler had attended 3 conferences where Damon had been the keynote speaker. He knew exactly who was sitting in seat 1A, and he knew this situation was about to explode in ways Sarah Collins couldn't possibly imagine. But Tyler stayed silent, frozen by the same social paralysis that keeps most witnesses quiet when they should speak up. The cabin's amber lighting cast long shadows across the scene, highlighting the contrast between Damon's composed dignity and Sarah's brittle authority. Other passengers began to notice the tension. An elderly couple in row 3 exchanged concerned glances. A businessman buried his face deeper in his newspaper, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to get involved. A young mother clutched her daughter's hand a little tighter and whispered, "Don't stare, honey." But she was staring, too unable to look away from the intersection of power and prejudice playing out in real time. Sarah tapped her tablet screen with increasing irritation. "Sir, I need you to gather your belongings and move to your assigned section. This is first class and there's clearly been a mistake with your seating." Damon's voice when it came was quiet steel. "There's been no mistake. I have seat 1A reserved and confirmed. Sir, I don't care what your ticket says. This cabin has standards." The phrase hung in the air like smoke from a struck match. Standards. The word carried weight far beyond its letters' assumptions about who belonged in premium spaces, who deserved comfort, who had earned the right to dignity at 35,000 feet. Sarah reached for Damon's boarding pass, her movements quick and dismissive. She barely glanced at it before shaking her head. "This doesn't look right. I'll need to see additional identification." But as she spoke, something else was happening. Damon's right hand moved almost imperceptibly to his smartwatch, his thumb pressing once against the digital crown in a gesture so subtle that only someone specifically watching would notice. In a corporate office building 3,000 miles away, Jennifer Davis. Damon's executive assistant felt her secure communication device vibrate with an incoming priority alert. The message was simple: Protocol 7 activated. Jennifer's response was immediate and calm. "Control, this is Davis. Mr. Mitchell has initiated Protocol 7. All support personnel stand by." Back in the cabin, Damon looked up at Sarah with eyes that had seen this script before: the assumptions, the confidence, the way prejudice dressed itself up as policy enforcement. "This will be a moment you remember," he said quietly. "All of you." Sarah Collins had survived 3 airline mergers in the past decade. Each restructuring had stripped away a little more job security, a little more dignity, a little more of the respect she felt she deserved. At 38, she was fighting a custody battle with her ex-husband, struggling with mortgage payments and clinging to the authority her flight attendant position provided like a life preserver in rough seas. When she looked at Damon, she didn't see a successful CEO. She saw a threat to the order she desperately needed to maintain. Someone who didn't fit her mental image of who belonged in first class, challenging the neat categories that helped her make sense of a world that had already taken too much from her. "I've been with this airline for 12 years, she told Damon, her voice rising just enough to ensure nearby passengers could hear. "I know who belongs where, and I know when something isn't right." Ryan Thompson chuckled from seat 1B, the sound carrying all the warmth of wind through a cemetery. At 47, Ryan had spent his career trading on connections and inherited wealth rather than actual competence. His private equity firm, Thompson Capital, was hemorrhaging investors faster than he could find new ones, but his sense of entitlement remained undiminished. "Look," friend Ryan said, swiveling in his seat to face Damon directly. "This isn't personal. It's just how things work up here. I'm sure you understand." But Ryan's casual dismissal carried an edge that everyone in earshot recognized. The way he said "friend" sounded like anything but friendship. The way he emphasized "up here" suggested Damon belonged somewhere else, somewhere down below. Sophia Martinez felt her stomach tighten as she watched the interaction unfold. At 26, Sophia had built a successful travel blog by documenting the authentic experiences of air travel, but she'd never encountered anything quite like this. Her follower count of 50,000 people trusted her to share real stories, and every instinct told her this was about to become a story that needed telling. She discreetly activated her phone's recording function, angling it to capture both the audio and visual elements of what was happening. Her finger hovered over the Go Live button on her streaming app, but she hesitated. Once she hit that button, whatever happened next would be broadcast to thousands of people in real time. Have you ever been the only person who looked like you in a room? Hit like if you know that feeling. Tyler Anderson sat 2 rows back, his laptop open but forgotten as he watched the scene develop with growing anxiety. At 24, Tyler had already founded 2 successful startups and had been invited to speak at the same technology conferences where Damon Mitchell was frequently the star presenter. Tyler knew exactly who was sitting in seat 1A, and he understood that Sarah Collins and Ryan Thompson were making a catastrophic mistake. But knowing and acting are different things. Tyler found himself caught in the paralysis that affects most witnesses to injustice, the desire to help warring with the fear of getting involved. The certainty that someone else would surely step in, warring with the growing realization that no one else was going to. Damon's internal monologue ran on multiple tracks as he assessed the situation. This wasn't just unprofessional behavior, it was targeted, deliberate prejudice wrapped in the language of policy enforcement. He'd encountered it countless times before the restaurant servers who assumed his white colleagues were paying the bill, the boardroom meetings, where participants spoke to his assistant instead of him, the countless moments when his presence in premium spaces was questioned. But this time was different. This time he had the power to ensure there were consequences. Ma'am Damon said to Sarah, his voice carrying the kind of measured calm that comes from years of executive training, "I'd like to speak with your supervisor." Sarah's laugh was sharp and brittle. "I am the supervisor for this cabin, and I'm telling you that you need to move to economy class, where your ticket actually places you." She was lying, and everyone knew it. Miguel Rodriguez, the actual shift supervisor, was currently in the galley area dealing with a catering issue, unaware that his flight attendant was digging both of them into a hole that would end careers. From his position near the cockpit, Captain James Wilson could hear raised voices but couldn't make out specific words. At 52, Wilson had been flying commercial aircraft for 26 years and had seen enough passenger disputes to know that most could be resolved with calm professionalism and common sense. He made a mental note to check on the situation after completing his pre-flight checklist. Elena Vasquez, the airport operations manager, was 3 terminals away, dealing with a delayed cargo shipment, completely unaware that one of Pacific Airways' most important corporate partners was being discriminated against in real time aboard one of her airline's aircraft. Back in the cabin, Ryan Thompson was enjoying the show far too much. His failing business portfolio had left him feeling powerless in most areas of his life, so watching someone else be diminished provided a temporary boost to his battered ego. "Sarah's just doing her job," Ryan announced to the cabin at large. "Rules are rules, right? Can't have people just sitting wherever they want." An older gentleman in row 4 looked up from his newspaper with obvious disapproval, not of Sarah's enforcement, but of the situation itself. A middle-aged woman across the aisle clutched her pearls literally and whispered something to her husband about standards slipping, but not everyone was comfortable with what they were witnessing. A young businessman in row 2 was staring at his phone, clearly uncomfortable, but uncertain how to intervene. A teacher returning from a conference in row 5 had her hand halfway to her call button, debating whether to involve herself. Sophia made her decision. She pressed the Go Live button on her streaming app and watched as viewer numbers began climbing immediately. "Hi, everyone," she whispered into her phone. "I'm on Pacific Airways flight PA482, and I need you to see what's happening right now." The first comments began appearing almost immediately. "What's going on? Is that discrimination? Record everything." Tyler Anderson finally found his voice. "Sarah," he called out his words, cutting through the murmur of conversation. "Are you absolutely certain you want to handle this situation this way?" Sarah turned to face him, her expression sharp with irritation. "Sir, unless you're airline personnel, I need you to stay out of this." But Tyler's intervention had broken something open. Other passengers were starting to pay attention, starting to realize they were witnessing something significant. The cabin energy was shifting from uncomfortable observation to active awareness. Damon remained perfectly still throughout the exchange, his hands folded in his lap, his breathing even and controlled. But behind his calm exterior, wheels were turning. Support personnel were activating, and people were positioning themselves for a response that would reshape everything about this flight. In her distant office, Jennifer Davis was already coordinating with David Foster, Pacific Airways legal counsel, and initiating contact with Elena Vasquez's operations team. The corporate emergency response protocol that Damon had developed for exactly these situations was now fully operational. Sarah Collins had no idea that her next words would end her career with Pacific Airways and set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the airline industry's approach to passenger dignity. "Sir," she said, her voice rising to ensure the entire first-class cabin could hear, "you can cooperate and move voluntarily, or I can have security escort you off this aircraft. The choice is yours." The threat dropped into the first-class cabin like a stone into still water, sending ripples of shock and discomfort through every row. Passengers who had been discreetly observing the interaction now turned to stare openly, their faces reflecting a mixture of fascination and horror. Sophia's live-stream viewer count had climbed to over 3,000 people in less than 2 minutes, and the comments were flowing faster than she could read them. Her whispered narration provided real-time context for her audience. A black passenger in first class is being told to move to economy. The flight attendant is threatening to have him removed by security. This is happening right now on Pacific Airways. Miguel Rodriguez finally emerged from the galley, drawn by the commotion and Sarah's raised voice. At 41, Miguel had worked in aviation for 15 years and had developed a strong instinct for situations that could spiral out of control. What he saw when he entered the first-class cabin sent a chill down his spine. "Sarah." He called out, his voice carrying the carefully modulated tone of someone trying to de-escalate without undermining a colleague. "Is everything all right here?" Sarah turned toward him with obvious relief. "Miguel, we have a passenger in the wrong section. I've asked him to move to economy, but he's being uncooperative." Miguel looked from Sarah to Damon, taking in the scene, a well-dressed black man sitting calmly in seat 1A, his boarding pass visible on the armrest, his carry-on bag properly stowed, showing no signs of agitation or unruliness. Miguel's experience told him that passengers who belonged in first class rarely needed to argue about it. Sir Miguel said, addressing Damon directly, "May I see your boarding pass?" Damon handed it over without comment. Miguel examined it carefully, noting the first-class designation, the seat assignment, and the premium passenger status indicators. Everything appeared to be in order, which made Sarah's insistence on removal all the more puzzling. "This shows seat 1A first class," Miguel said slowly, looking between the boarding pass and Sarah's increasingly flushed face. "That has to be a mistake," Sarah insisted, "or fraudulent. I know our passenger demographics, and this doesn't fit." The words hung in the air like a confession. Sarah had just admitted in front of dozens of witnesses and Sophia's growing live audience that she was making seating decisions based on passenger appearance rather than ticket verification. Ryan Thompson, sensing an opportunity to demonstrate his perceived importance, leaned forward from seat 1B. "Look, I pay $15,000 annually to this airline. I specifically requested privacy from—" He paused, his eyes moving deliberately over Damon's face these types of situations. "If you believe respect shouldn't depend on skin color, share this video." Tyler Anderson had heard enough. At 24, he might have been the youngest person in first class, but his tech industry background had exposed him to enough diversity and inclusion training to recognize discrimination when he saw it. More importantly, he knew exactly who Sarah and Ryan were targeting. Sarah Tyler called out, his voice carrying more authority than his age might suggest. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to, sir?" "I've already asked you to stay out of this," Sarah snapped back. "Unless you're airline personnel, this isn't your concern." "Actually," Tyler said, standing up and moving closer to row 1, "I think it's everyone's concern when we witness discrimination happening in real time." The word discrimination electrified the cabin. Passengers who had been uncomfortable but passive suddenly sat up straighter. Phone cameras emerged from purses and jacket pockets. The elderly couple in row 3 leaned forward to better hear the conversation. Sophia's live stream had reached 5,000 viewers, and she was struggling to keep up with the flood of comments demanding updates, sharing their own stories, and expressing outrage at what they were witnessing. A flight attendant from the economy section appeared at the galley entrance, drawn by the commotion. Marcus Williams, a 10-year Pacific Airways veteran, took one look at the situation and immediately understood its potential implications. He'd seen discrimination complaints destroy careers and trigger lawsuits that cost airlines millions. Miguel Marcus said quietly, approaching the shift supervisor, "Maybe we should call the captain." But before Miguel could respond, Damon finally spoke up, his voice cutting through the increasing chaos with calm precision. "This will be a moment you remember. All of you." The words were soft, but they carried a weight that made everyone in earshot pause. There was something in Damon's tone, not anger, not frustration, but absolute certainty that suggested he knew something the rest of them didn't. Sarah, sensing her authority slipping away, decided to double down. "I'm calling airport security. This passenger is being disruptive and refusing to follow crew instructions." She reached for the airphone, her movements sharp and deliberate. But as she lifted the handset, Damon made a subtle gesture that nobody else noticed. His right hand moved to his smartwatch and his thumb pressed the digital crown once, then twice. 3,000 miles away, Jennifer Davis felt her secure communication device vibrate with an escalation alert. The pattern of vibrations told her everything she needed to know. Protocol 7 had been upgraded to Protocol 9. Full corporate response authorization. Control. "This is Davis," Jennifer said into her headset. "Mr. Mitchell has escalated to Protocol 9. David Foster, please conference in immediately. Elena Vasquez, we need airport operations involved. This is now a corporate priority incident." Back on the airport, security was indeed responding to Sarah's call, but not in the way she expected. 2 uniformed officers approached the gate area, but their supervisor had already received a call from airport operations flagging the incident as sensitive and requiring careful handling. Inside the cabin, Damon reached into his laptop bag and pulled out a folder containing multiple forms of identification: his driver's license, his corporate American Express, black card, his TSA, pre-check documentation, and his Pacific Airways Premier Executive Status Card, the highest tier of frequent flyer membership. He placed them all on his tray table, facing toward Sarah and Miguel. "Before you proceed further," Damon said, his voice remaining perfectly calm, "I suggest you verify your assumptions very carefully." Sophia caught the exchange on her live stream, zooming in on the array of premium identification documents. Her viewer count had climbed past 10,000, and aviation reporters monitoring social media feeds were beginning to take notice. Seatgate had begun trending on social media, with clips from Sophia's live stream being shared across multiple platforms. The hashtag Dignity in the Skies was gaining momentum as viewers shared their own experiences of travel discrimination. Tyler Anderson pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly, crafting a Twitter thread about the incident. As a verified account with significant tech industry followers, his posts would amplify the story beyond Sophia's live stream audience. Sarah stared at the identification documents, her confidence beginning to waver for the first time since the confrontation began. The American Express black card alone suggested significant financial resources, and the Premier Executive Status Card indicated Damon was exactly the kind of high-value customer the airline prioritized. But instead of backing down, Sarah's defensive instincts kicked in stronger than ever. She'd committed too much to reverse course, now invested too much authority in being right to accept being wrong. "I don't care what documents you have," she said, her voice carrying a brittle edge. "I know what I see, and I know who belongs where." It was the admission that would end her career and transform a simple seating dispute into a viral moment that would reshape industry standards across aviation. The smartwatch on Damon's wrist looked ordinary enough, black band, silver case, nothing that would attract attention from casual observers. But the technology embedded within it was far from standard. It was a custom communication device designed by his own company's engineers, capable of establishing secure connections with his support team anywhere in the world. When Damon had pressed the digital crown twice, he'd activated what his team called Protocol 9, full corporate emergency response for situations requiring immediate legal and public relations intervention. The signal traveled through encrypted channels to an operations center that looked more like something from a spy movie than a typical corporate office. Jennifer Davis sat at the center of this operation, her multiple monitors displaying real-time data feeds, social media monitoring news outlet, tracking legal database access, and direct communication channels with Pacific Airways executive leadership. At 29, Jennifer had worked her way up from executive assistant to director of crisis management, though her official title remained deliberately modest to avoid drawing attention. "David, are you on the line?" Jennifer spoke into her headset, while her fingers flew across multiple keyboards. Connected came the reply from David Foster, Pacific Airways chief legal counsel. At 45, David had built his reputation defending airlines against discrimination lawsuits. What made him valuable to Pacific Airways wasn't just his legal expertise, but his ability to prevent small incidents from becoming massive corporate disasters. "What's our status?" David asked. "Active discrimination incident on flight PA482 LAX to JFK. Mr. Mitchell is being threatened with removal from first class based solely on appearance. Multiple witnesses live streaming in progress, social media activation confirmed. Hashtag is already trending." David's sharp intake of breath was audible through the headset. He'd been dreading a call like this for months. Pacific Airways had settled 3 discrimination suits in the past year, each one costing millions in legal fees and reputation damage. But a public incident involving Damon Mitchell would be exponentially worse. Who else knows airport operations is being notified now? Elena Vasquez is responding personally. Security has been called by the flight crew, but they're unaware of Mr. Mitchell's identity. Keep it that way until we can control the narrative David instructed. "What's our legal exposure?" Jennifer's response was immediate. Civil rights violation, breach of contract, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and potential punitive damages. Conservative estimate, 15 to 20 million in settlement costs, plus reputation damage that could impact our technology partnerships. Back on the aircraft, the secure earpiece Damon wore was nearly invisible, designed to look like a high-end hearing aid rather than a communication device. The voice that came through it was calm and professional. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Jennifer. We have David Foster and Elena Vasquez standing by. Protocol 9 is fully operational. How do you want to proceed?" Damon's response was subtle, spoken so quietly that only the most attentive observers might notice his lips moving. "Let them finish digging their hole. Full documentation required." "Understood, sir. Recording everything through your device. Security cameras have been accessed remotely. We have multiple angles." What Jennifer didn't mention was that Mitchell Technology Solutions had provided the software that ran Pacific Airways' security camera network. Accessing the feeds wasn't hacking. It was using administrative privileges that came with their technology partnership. Every moment of the incident was being recorded in multiple high-definition angles and automatically backed up to secure servers. Sophia's live stream had reached 15,000 viewers, and major aviation industry reporters were beginning to take notice. Her phone showed a flood of direct messages from news outlets requesting permission to use her footage. "This is unbelievable," Sophia whispered into her phone. "I've never seen anything like this. The flight attendant is doubling down and airport security is on the way." Tyler Anderson had finished composing his Twitter thread and was about to hit publish when he decided to take a different approach. Instead of tweeting immediately, he opened his contact list and found the number for his friend Rebecca Chen, a reporter for Aviation Weekly who specialized in industry discrimination stories. "Rebecca, it's Tyler. I'm on a flight where something major is happening. Discrimination against a black passenger in first class, and I think you need to know about it." Miguel Rodriguez was experiencing the growing realization that the situation was spiraling beyond his control. His 15 years of aviation experience had taught him to recognize the difference between routine passenger disputes and incidents that could destroy careers. This was rapidly becoming the latter. "Sarah," he said quietly, trying to draw her aside, "maybe we should reconsider our approach here." But Sarah was too committed to her course of action to back down now. "Miguel, I know what I'm doing. I've been handling difficult passengers longer than you've been with this airline." It was technically true Sarah had been hired 6 months before Miguel, but the statement revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. This wasn't a difficult passenger. This was a paying customer being targeted because his appearance didn't match her assumptions about who belonged in first class. Captain James Wilson finally completed his pre-flight checklist and decided to investigate the commotion he'd been hearing from the cabin. As he emerged from the cockpit, he could immediately see the tension in the first-class section. Multiple passengers were standing. Phones were recording, and his flight crew appeared to be in the middle of a serious confrontation. Wilson had been flying commercial aircraft for 26 years. And one thing he'd learned was that passenger incidents could escalate quickly if not handled with careful professionalism. What he was seeing suggested that careful professionalism had already been abandoned. Elena Vasquez was 3 terminals away when her emergency communication device buzzed with an urgent priority alert. As airport operations manager, Elena was responsible for managing crisis situations that could impact Pacific Airways' operations reputation or legal exposure. The message on her screen was brief but alarming. Discrimination incident flight, PA 482. High-value passenger. Media attention. Your immediate response required. Elena had dealt with discrimination complaints before, but always after the fact, always through formal complaint channels that allowed for measured corporate responses. An incident happening in real time with media coverage and social media amplification was her worst nightmare scenario. She immediately dispatched her fastest security team to Gate 18 while beginning the drive across the massive airport complex herself. Back in the cabin, Ryan Thompson was enjoying his front-row seat to the drama far too much. His failing business portfolio had left him feeling powerless in most areas of his life. So watching someone else be diminished provided a temporary boost to his battered ego. "Just move the guy already," Ryan said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Some of us have connections to make." Those words would prove to be another nail in the coffin of his own business relationships, though he wouldn't understand that for several more minutes. Damon checked his watch, not for the time, but to activate his device's recording function. Every word spoken in the cabin was now being captured and transmitted to his legal team for analysis and documentation. The confrontation was about to escalate beyond anything Sarah Collins or Ryan Thompson could imagine. Airport security arrived at Gate 18 with the measured pace of professionals who had seen every possible passenger dispute. Officers. Michael Rodriguez and Diana Foster approached the aircraft knowing only that flight crew had requested assistance with an uncooperative passenger situation. What they found was far more complex than their briefing had suggested. "Officers, thank you for responding," Sarah said as the security team boarded the aircraft. "We have a passenger refusing to move to his correct seating assignment." Officer Rodriguez, no relation to shift supervisor Miguel, had 15 years of airport security experience. One thing he'd learned was that passenger disputes usually had 2 sides, and flight crew weren't always objective arbitrators of conflicts. He decided to assess the situation before taking action. "Sir," he addressed Damon directly, "can you explain your understanding of the situation?" Damon's response was calm and measured. "I'm seated in 1A, which corresponds to my boarding pass and reservation. I've provided multiple forms of identification confirming my identity and status. I haven't raised my voice, used profanity, or behaved disruptively in any way." Officer Rodriguez examined the boarding pass and identification documents Damon had placed on his tray table. Everything appeared to be legitimate and in order. The American Express black card alone suggested this wasn't a typical wrong section passenger. Ma'am Rodriguez said to Sarah what specific policy violation is prompting the removal request. Sarah's response revealed the fundamental weakness of her position. He doesn't belong in first class. I can tell just by looking at him. The words hung in the air like a confession. Officer Rodriguez exchanged a glance with his partner. Neither of them was eager to remove a paying passenger based solely on appearance, especially when that passenger's documentation appeared to be completely legitimate. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, David Foster was coordinating Pacific Airways' legal response with surgical precision. His team had already accessed the incident reports and passenger manifests, confirming what he'd suspected: Damon Mitchell was not just any passenger. Jennifer David said through the secure communication channel, "I need you to conference in Patricia Williams from Corporate Communications. We're going to need damage control strategies, and we're going to need them fast." Patricia Williams, Pacific Airways Director of Public Relations, was in her car heading to dinner when her emergency phone buzzed with a priority conference call notification. At 43, Patricia had managed corporate crises for major airlines throughout her career, but nothing had prepared her for what David Foster was about to tell her. "Patricia, we have a live discrimination incident involving Damon Mitchell. It's being streamed to thousands of viewers, trending on social media, and getting pickup from aviation reporters." Patricia's immediate response was unprintable. Her second response was more professional. "What's our timeline for containment?" "Unknown. The incident is ongoing, and our flight crew is escalating rather than de-escalating." Back on the aircraft, Sophia's live stream had reached 25,000 viewers. The comments section had become a rolling feed of outrage support and shared experiences of travel discrimination. Major news outlets were beginning to reach out directly requesting permission to use her footage. Tyler Anderson had decided to go public with what he knew. His Twitter thread began, "I'm currently on Pacific Airways Flight PA-482, witnessing what appears to be clear discrimination against a black passenger in first class. The passenger is calm, has proper documentation, but is being threatened with removal based on appearance." Thread 112. Tyler's verified status and tech industry following meant his thread would reach tens of thousands of people within minutes, amplifying the story beyond Sophia's live stream audience. Captain Wilson had now reached the first-class cabin and was assessing the situation with growing alarm. In 26 years of commercial aviation, he'd learned to recognize the difference between legitimate security concerns and discrimination complaints. What he was witnessing clearly fell into the latter category. Sarah Wilson said, his voice carrying the authority of his position, "I need to speak with you privately." But Sarah was too committed to her course of action to accept intervention, even from the captain. "James, I'm handling this situation according to company policy. This passenger doesn't belong in first class." Wilson's response was measured but firm. Sarah, company policy is that passengers seated in accordance with their tickets and maintaining appropriate behavior are not subject to removal. This passenger appears to meet both criteria. The captain's intervention should have ended the situation, but Sarah's defensive instincts were now fully activated. "I've been doing this job for 12 years. I know who belongs where." Those words would later be featured in Pacific Airways employee training materials as an example of how personal bias can override professional judgment. Elena Vasquez had finally reached Gate 18, arriving breathless and already dreading what she might find. As airport operations manager, Elena was responsible for preventing exactly these types of incidents from escalating into corporate disasters. What she found exceeded her worst expectations. Multiple passengers were recording with phones, social media posts were spreading rapidly, and her flight crew appeared to be in direct conflict with airport security over passenger removal procedures. Officers, Elena said, identifying herself to security, "I need a full briefing on this situation." Officer Rodriguez provided a concise summary. Legitimate passenger proper documentation, no policy violations, removal requested based solely on appearance. Elena's stomach dropped as she realized the legal and public relations implications. Meanwhile, Jennifer Davis was coordinating multiple response streams simultaneously. Her monitors showed real-time social media analytics, news outlet monitoring, and direct communication feeds with Pacific Airways executives. David, she reported, we have confirmation of live streaming to 30,000-plus viewers. Twitter trends are accelerating. Aviation Week and CNN are requesting comment. We need executive decision-making authority. David Foster made the call that would determine Pacific Airways' response strategy. Get me CEO Michael Anderson on the line immediately. This requires top-level authorization. Back in the cabin, Damon remained perfectly calm while chaos swirled around him. His secure earpiece provided continuous updates from his support team, and his smartwatch was recording everything through multiple channels. Mr. Mitchell, Jennifer's voice came through clearly. We have corporate leadership engaged on Pacific Airways' side. Elena Vasquez is on scene. How do you want to proceed? Damon's response was barely audible. Let them make the next move. Full documentation continues. Ryan Thompson, oblivious to the corporate and legal machinery now engaged on both sides, decided to assert his perceived importance once again. Look, I don't care who this guy is or what his story is. I paid for first-class service and I expect first-class passengers. The implications of Ryan's statement weren't lost on anyone listening. He'd just articulated the discriminatory thinking underlying the entire incident, that first-class service was somehow dependent on passenger demographics rather than ticket purchase. Elena Vasquez approached Damon directly, hoping to de-escalate before the situation became completely unmanageable. Sir, I'm Elena Vasquez, Airport Operations Manager for Pacific Airways. I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience you've experienced. Elena's professional training told her to take control of the narrative, but her legal training warned her against admitting fault before understanding the full scope of the situation. Damon looked up at Elena with the kind of measured assessment that comes from years of executive decision-making. Ms. Vasquez, I appreciate your professionalism. However, this situation has moved beyond simple inconvenience. The words were polite, but Elena recognized the tone. She'd heard it before in corporate boardrooms when deals were about to collapse or partnerships were about to be terminated. It was the sound of consequences being calculated. Sir, Elena said carefully, Is there anything we can do to resolve this situation satisfactorily? Damon's response was quiet but clear. The question isn't what you can do for me. The question is what you're going to do about this pattern of behavior affecting other passengers who don't have the resources to defend themselves. Elena realized that she wasn't dealing with a simple customer service recovery situation. She was dealing with someone who understood corporate accountability on a level that suggested significant business experience. May I ask what your connection to the airline industry is? Elena asked. Technology partnerships, Damon replied. Quite extensive ones. Elena's mind raced through Pacific Airways' major technology vendors, but she couldn't immediately place the name Damon Mitchell. What she didn't realize was that Mitchell Technology Solutions operated primarily through subsidiary companies, keeping Damon's personal involvement discreet from day-to-day operations. The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control of the situation. Elena, I've followed proper procedures here. This passenger is being disruptive and needs to be removed. But Elena could see that the only person being disruptive was Sarah herself. Damon remained calm. Other passengers were recording and commenting, but no one was behaving inappropriately except the flight crew. Officer Rodriguez made the decision that would effectively end Sarah's career with Pacific Airways. Ma'am, he said to Sarah, I'm not removing this passenger. He has proper documentation, appropriate behavior, and legitimate seating. If you want him removed, you'll need to provide specific policy violations. Sarah's response revealed the depth of her commitment to a discriminatory position. I don't need specific violations. I use my judgment about who belongs where. Elena Vasquez realized that her airline was now facing a potential discrimination lawsuit with multiple witnesses, video documentation, and social media amplification. Her immediate priority shifted from customer service recovery to damage control and legal protection. Sarah Elena said firmly, I need you to step back and let me handle this situation. But Sarah had invested too much authority in being right to accept being wrong, especially not in front of dozens of witnesses and thousands of online viewers. The confrontation was about to reach its breaking point. Jennifer Davis's voice came through Damon's earpiece with military precision. Sir, I have David Foster and Elena Vasquez's supervisor standing by. Pacific Airways CEO Michael Anderson has been notified and is requesting immediate briefing. How do you want us to proceed? Damon's response was barely audible, spoken so softly that even passengers in adjacent seats couldn't hear. Full corporate disclosure. Activate all partnership protocols. 3,000 miles away, Jennifer's fingers moved across multiple keyboards with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, she had accessed Pacific Airways' internal vendor management system, using Mitchell Technology Solutions' administrative credentials. The data that appeared on her screen would reshape the entire incident. Mitchell Technology Solutions wasn't just any corporate partner. Damon's company provided the core software architecture for Pacific Airways reservation systems, mobile applications, customer service platforms, and security networks. The annual contract value exceeded $200 million, making Mitchell Technology Solutions one of Pacific Airways' largest and most critical vendors. More importantly, the contract included specific service-level agreements about customer treatment and brand representation. Discrimination against passengers directly violated multiple clauses in their technology partnership agreement. David Jennifer said through the conference line to Pacific Airways legal counsel, I'm transmitting our partnership documentation now. Section 12.4 specifically addresses brand representation and customer dignity standards. David Foster's response was immediate and alarmed. Jennifer, please tell me this incident isn't a contract violation. I'm afraid it's exactly that. Public discrimination, recorded evidence, social media amplification, all involving your primary technology partner's CEO. Back on the aircraft, Tyler Anderson had finished his Twitter thread and was now providing real-time updates to his growing audience. His verified status and tech industry connections meant each post was being shared and amplified exponentially. Update: Airport security has arrived but refuses to remove the passenger citing lack of policy violation. Flight attendant is insisting on removal based on judgment rather than specific infractions. This is discrimination, pure and simple. Sophia's live stream had reached 40,000 viewers, and major news outlets were now monitoring the feed directly. CNN's breaking news team was preparing preliminary reports based on her footage, and Aviation Week had assigned their senior discrimination reporter to begin developing a comprehensive story. Miguel Rodriguez was experiencing the sinking realization that his shift was about to become a career-defining disaster. His 15 years of aviation experience told him that situations like this required immediate de-escalation, but Sarah's intransigence was making that impossible. Sarah Miguel said quietly, trying one last time to redirect her approach, I think we should reconsider our position here. Miguel! I know what I'm doing, Sarah snapped back. I've handled hundreds of passenger disputes, and this isn't any different. But it was different in ways Sarah couldn't possibly understand. Every moment of delay was giving Damon's support team more time to coordinate a response, giving social media more time to amplify the story, and giving Pacific Airways executives more time to realize the full scope of their liability. Elena Vasquez was now fielding urgent communications from multiple sources. Her phone was buzzing with calls from corporate communications, legal affairs, and executive leadership. Each conversation was more urgent than the last as the corporate machinery began to understand what was happening. Elena came the voice of Patricia Williams, Director of Public Relations, through her earpiece. I need immediate situation assessment. CNN is requesting comment and social media engagement is exceeding crisis threshold levels. Elena's response reflected her growing alarm. Patricia, we have active discrimination with multiple witnesses live streaming and apparent contract violation implications. I need executive authority to resolve this immediately. Captain Wilson had reached his limit of tolerance for the situation. 26 years of commercial aviation had taught him that passenger safety and airline reputation were directly connected to crew professionalism. What he was witnessing threatened both. Sarah Wilson said with unmistakable authority, I'm ordering you to step back and allow proper resolution of this situation. Sarah's response revealed the depth of her defensive commitment. Captain, with all due respect, this is a cabin service issue, not a flight operations matter. Wilson's expression showed that Sarah had just made a catastrophic error in judgment. Discriminating against passengers was absolutely a flight operations matter affecting everything from legal liability to passenger safety to corporate reputation. Sarah, you're relieved from passenger service duties for the remainder of this flight, Wilson announced. Miguel, I need you to take direct control of this situation. But before Miguel could respond, Damon finally decided to reveal the first hint of his true position. Captain Wilson. Damon said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being heard before any further actions are taken. I suggest your airline verify exactly who you're threatening to remove from this aircraft. The words were spoken calmly, but they carried an undertone that made everyone in earshot pause. There was something in Damon's tone that suggested he knew something they didn't, that he held information that could change everything about the situation. Elena Vasquez felt her stomach drop. Years of crisis management experience had taught her to recognize the moment when a situation shifted from recoverable to catastrophic. The certainty in Damon's voice suggested that moment had arrived. Sir Elena said carefully, Would you be willing to clarify your position? Damon reached into his laptop bag and extracted a business card. It was simple, elegant, and bore the logo of Mitchell Technology Solutions, along with his name and title, Damon Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer. Elena's eyes widened as she recognized the company name. Every Pacific Airways manager knew Mitchell Technology Solutions as one of their primary vendors, but few had ever met the company's leadership personally. Tyler Anderson, watching from row 3, decided the time for subtlety had passed. Sarah, he called out loudly enough for everyone to hear, do you have any idea who you've been threatening for the past 20 minutes? Sarah turned toward Tyler with obvious irritation. Sir, I've repeatedly asked you to stay out of this. His name is Damon Mitchell. Tyler announced to the entire cabin. He's the CEO of Mitchell Technology Solutions, and his company probably runs half the software that keeps this airline operational. The effect was immediate and electric. Several passengers pulled out phones to Google the name. Sophia's live stream comments exploded with viewers sharing information about Mitchell Technology Solutions. Elena Vasquez felt her knees go weak as the implications hit her. But Sarah, caught in the defensive spiral that had been building for 20 minutes, couldn't back down even when faced with direct evidence of her mistake. I don't care what company he runs, Sarah declared. This is about cabin standards and appropriate passenger placement. Those words would be replayed thousands of times on social media and cited in multiple discrimination lawsuits. Sarah had just doubled down on appearance-based seating decisions even after learning Damon's corporate position. Jennifer Davis, monitoring everything through Damon's communication device, provided another update. Mr. Mitchell, we have confirmation that Pacific Airways executives are now fully engaged. CEO Anderson is requesting direct communication. Legal department is preparing immediate response protocols. Elena Vasquez was now frantically searching through her mental database of Pacific Airways vendor relationships. Mitchell Technology Solutions held contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. More importantly, those contracts included reputation and brand management clauses that made discrimination incidents potential grounds for contract termination. Mr. Mitchell. Elena said, her voice carefully controlled, "I sincerely apologize for this situation. Is there anything we can do to resolve this appropriately?" Damon's response was measured and professional. "Miss Vasquez. The resolution isn't about me personally. It's about the pattern of behavior your airline tolerates and the passengers who don't have the resources to defend themselves against discrimination." The words carried weight that everyone present could feel. This wasn't about upgrading a customer or providing compensation. This was about corporate accountability and equal treatment standards. Officer Rodriguez, who had been observing the entire exchange, made his position clear. "Ma'am," he said to Elena, "I want it on record that this passenger has violated no policies and has behaved appropriately throughout this interaction. Any removal request is without merit." Ryan Thompson, finally beginning to understand that his entertainment was actually a corporate disaster in progress, attempted to distance himself from the situation. "Look, I never said anything about removing anyone. I just wanted a quiet flight." But Tyler Anderson had been recording audio on his phone throughout the incident. Ryan's earlier statements about these types and his demands for passenger removal were preserved in digital format and would soon be shared widely. Captain Wilson stepped forward to take direct control. "Mr. Mitchell, on behalf of Pacific Airways, I apologize for the unprofessional behavior you've experienced. This does not represent our company's values or standards." Damon looked up at Wilson with the measured assessment of someone who had spent years evaluating corporate sincerity. "Captain, I appreciate your professionalism. However, your crew members have made it clear that discrimination is indeed your company's practice, regardless of stated values." Elena realized that conventional customer service recovery wasn't going to be sufficient. This situation required executive-level intervention and immediate corporate policy response. "Mr. Mitchell," Elena said, "would you be willing to speak directly with our executive leadership?" "That conversation is already being arranged," Damon replied. "The question is whether Pacific Airways wants to resolve this professionally or whether you prefer to continue with your current approach." The gauntlet had been thrown down, and everyone present understood that the next few minutes would determine whether this incident ended with professional resolution or complete corporate disaster. Sofia Martinez's live stream had become the epicenter of a digital earthquake. Her viewer count had climbed past 50,000, and the comment section was moving too fast for anyone to follow. Major news outlets were no longer just monitoring her feed. They were broadcasting excerpts during breaking news segments. "I can't believe what I'm witnessing," Sophia whispered into her phone, her voice tight with emotion. "This is discrimination happening in real time, being broadcast to the world, and the airline staff is doubling down instead of backing down." The hashtag Seatgate had become the #1 trending topic on Twitter, surpassing even major political news stories. Dignity in the Skies was climbing rapidly behind it, with passengers sharing their own stories of travel discrimination using Sophia's incident as a catalyst. Tyler Anderson's Twitter thread had been retweeted over 15,000 times in the past 10 minutes. His followers included major tech industry leaders, civil rights advocates, and corporate executives who were beginning to understand the massive implications of what was unfolding. Update 8:12. Tyler typed rapidly. "Flight crew has been informed of passenger's identity as CEO of major airline technology partner. Instead of de-escalating, lead flight attendant has stated she doesn't care about his corporate position. This is unprecedented." In the cabin, other passengers were no longer just observing. They were actively participating in documenting what they recognized as a historic moment. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a civil rights lawyer traveling in Seat 2C, had been discreetly recording audio since the incident began. "Excuse me," Dr. Rodriguez said to Elena Vasquez, identifying herself and offering her business card. I'm an attorney specializing in discrimination cases, and I want to state for the record that what I've witnessed constitutes clear civil rights violations. Elena's stomach dropped further. Having a civil rights lawyer as a witness transformed the situation from a customer service issue into a legal liability with expert testimony available from the moment of incident. An elderly couple in row 4, Harold and Margaret Thompson, had initially supported Sarah's position based on their own biases. But as they learned more about Damon's professional credentials and witnessed the blatant discrimination, their perspective began shifting. Margaret Harold whispered to his wife, "I think we're witnessing something terrible here." Margaret nodded her face, showing the uncomfortable realization that her initial assumptions had been wrong. That young man hasn't done anything except sit quietly in his assigned seat. Their transformation from passive supporters of discrimination to witnesses of injustice was being captured by multiple recording devices and would later become a powerful element in advocacy campaigns about confronting unconscious bias. 3 rows back, Maria Santos, a teacher from Los Angeles, was explaining the situation to her 12-year-old daughter in Spanish. "Mira, this is why we fight for justice," Maria said quietly. "This gentleman is being treated unfairly because of how he looks, not because of anything he's done." The child's response was innocent but profound. "Mama, why don't they just say sorry and leave him alone?" Maria's answer would later be quoted in multiple news articles. Because sometimes Mija people would rather be wrong than admit they made a mistake. Jennifer Davis was monitoring social media engagement in real time, and the numbers were staggering. "Mr. Mitchell," she reported through the secure channel, "we have over 100,000 social media mentions in the past 30 minutes. Major celebrities are beginning to share the story. This is approaching viral saturation." Aviation reporter Rebecca Chen had arrived at LAX and was being briefed by Tyler Anderson via phone while she navigated through airport security. "Tyler, I need you to keep documenting everything. This story is going to reshape industry discussions about discrimination." Back east, Michael Anderson, CEO of Pacific Airways, was in an emergency conference call with his executive team. The implications were becoming clear. Their largest technology partner was being discriminated against aboard one of their aircraft. The incident was being broadcast globally, and their staff was escalating rather than resolving the situation. "How did we get here?" Anderson asked his team. Patricia Williams, Director of Public Relations, provided the painful truth: inadequate training, insufficient oversight, and a corporate culture that has tolerated discriminatory behavior as long as it didn't generate complaints. David Foster, legal counsel, was more direct. "We're looking at tens of millions in potential liability contract violations and reputation damage. This single incident could reshape our entire vendor relationship portfolio." On the aircraft, Sophia's live stream had attracted the attention of Maya Johnson, a prominent civil rights activist with over 2 million social media followers. Maya began sharing clips from Sophia's stream with commentary that amplified the story exponentially. "This is why we keep fighting," Maya posted. "In 2025, successful Black professionals are still being treated like they don't belong in spaces they've earned access to." Seatgate dignity. In the skies, celebrity shares began multiplying. Actor Michael Davis posted, "Watched this entire incident unfold live. Heartbreaking and infuriating. Do better, Pacific Airways." Musician Sarah Williams added, "Discrimination is still alive and well in our airlines. This CEO handled it with more grace than they deserved." Seatgate. The viral amplification was reaching critical mass, with major news networks interrupting regular programming to report on the live-streamed discrimination incident. CNN's breaking news ticker read, "Live Black CEO discriminated against on airline incident," streaming to hundreds of thousands. Sarah Collins was becoming increasingly aware that the situation was spiraling beyond her control, but her defensive mechanisms wouldn't allow her to back down. I don't care how many people are recording or what they're saying online. I know what's right for this cabin." Miguel Rodriguez was now fielding direct calls from Pacific Airways corporate headquarters. Miguel came the voice of his district manager. "You need to resolve this situation immediately. We have executive leadership demanding answers." "I've tried," Miguel responded quietly. "Sarah won't de-escalate, and the passenger has legitimate documentation for his seat." "Then override Sarah's authority and resolve this professionally," came the firm response. But before Miguel could act, Damon decided to take control of the narrative himself. He stood up slowly, his movement causing everyone in the cabin to pause and pay attention. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of executives and decision-makers. "I want everyone here to understand something," Damon said, his words calm, but carrying to every corner of the first-class cabin. "This isn't about me. This isn't about my company, or my status, or my ability to fight back. This is about every passenger who looks like me, who doesn't have the resources to defend themselves, who gets discriminated against, and has no recourse." The cabin fell completely silent. Even Sarah stopped moving, recognizing that something fundamental had just shifted in the dynamic. Every person recording this, every person sharing this story, every person watching online, you're witnessing the daily reality that millions of people face when they travel. The only difference is that I have the platform to ensure there are consequences. Sophia's live stream comments exploded with responses. Viewers were sharing their own stories, expressing support and demanding accountability from Pacific Airways. Tyler Anderson looked around the cabin and made a decision that would define his role in the incident. "Mr. Mitchell is right," he announced to everyone present. "We're all witnesses to discrimination, and we all have a responsibility to ensure this kind of treatment becomes unacceptable." Dr. Rodriguez added her professional voice. "As an attorney, I can confirm that what we've witnessed constitutes clear civil rights violations. This incident will have legal consequences." Elena Vasquez realized that the situation had evolved beyond a customer service issue into a public reckoning with discriminatory practices. Every moment of delay was making the eventual resolution more difficult and more expensive. The viral momentum was unstoppable now, and Pacific Airways was about to face the full consequences of allowing discrimination to flourish in their corporate culture. The secure communication device in Elena Vasquez's ear buzzed with an urgent message from Pacific Airways headquarters. The voice of CEO Michael Anderson himself cut through the cabin noise with unmistakable authority. "Elena, this is Michael Anderson. I need you to understand that you are currently dealing with Damon Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Technology Solutions, our primary technology vendor. The contract implications alone could shut down our reservation systems if this situation is not resolved immediately and professionally." Elena's face went pale as the full scope of the disaster became clear. She had known Mitchell Technology Solutions as a vendor name, but she hadn't connected it to the calm, casually dressed man being discriminated against by her flight crew. "Mr. Mitchell," Elena said, her voice carrying new urgency and respect. "I've just been briefed on your company's relationship with Pacific Airways. I sincerely apologize for not recognizing you immediately." Damon's response was measured and professional. "Ms. Vasquez, the problem isn't that you didn't recognize me. The problem is that recognition should be irrelevant to how passengers are treated on your airline." Jennifer Davis's voice came through Damon's earpiece with updated information. "Sir, I have David Foster requesting immediate conference with you and Pacific Airways executive team. They're prepared to discuss comprehensive resolution, including policy changes and accountability measures." Meanwhile, Captain Wilson was receiving similar communications through his own channels. The Flight Operations Center was making it clear that this situation required immediate executive-level intervention. Mr. Mitchell Wilson said, stepping forward, "I've just received authorization to offer you direct communication with our CEO and executive team. Would you be willing to participate in that conversation?" Before Damon could respond, Sarah Collins made the comment that would end her career permanently. "I don't care if he's the CEO of 10 companies," Sarah announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, including Sophia's 50,000 live stream viewers. "This cabin has standards, and I enforce them based on what I see, not what someone's business card says." The reaction was immediate and devastating. Dr. Rodriguez audibly gasped and began typing notes on her phone. Tyler Anderson's eyes widened as he realized Sarah had just provided perfect evidence for any future discrimination lawsuit. Sophia's live stream comments exploded with outrage. But most importantly, Elena Vasquez now understood that Sarah Collins represented an existential threat to Pacific Airways' corporate relationships, legal standing, and public reputation. Sarah Elena said with unmistakable authority, "You are immediately suspended from all passenger service duties pending investigation." Sarah's response revealed the depth of her defensive commitment. "Elena, you can't suspend me for doing my job correctly." "Your job," Elena replied firmly, "is to serve passengers professionally regardless of their appearance. What you've been doing is discrimination, and it ends now." Tyler Anderson decided that the moment required complete transparency. He stood up and addressed the entire cabin, speaking clearly so his words would be captured by all the recording devices present. "Everyone needs to understand who we've just witnessed being discriminated against," Tyler announced. "Damon Mitchell isn't just any CEO. Mitchell Technology Solutions provides the software that runs Pacific Airways reservation systems, mobile apps, customer service platforms, and security networks. This airline literally could not operate without his company's technology." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Sophia's live stream viewers began researching Mitchell Technology Solutions, discovering the scope of the company's partnerships across the aviation industry. News reporters monitoring the story began understanding the massive business implications of the discrimination. Dr. Rodriguez provided professional context. From a legal perspective, discriminating against a primary business partner while providing services creates additional liability beyond standard civil rights violations. This incident could trigger contract breach claims worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Miguel Rodriguez finally found the courage to act decisively. "Sarah, I'm formally relieving you of duties for the remainder of this flight. Your actions have violated company policy and created massive liability for Pacific Airways." But Sarah's response demonstrated why customer service recovery was no longer possible. "Miguel, I know what I saw, and I made the right decision based on cabin standards. I won't be punished for maintaining appropriate passenger demographics." Her words were being broadcast live to tens of thousands of viewers and recorded by multiple devices. Sarah had just provided explicit evidence of discriminatory intent that would be featured in employment termination proceedings and civil rights litigation. Jennifer Davis provided Damon with real-time updates through his earpiece. Sir Pacific Airways' stock price is beginning to fluctuate on after-hours trading as news of this incident spreads. We're seeing major institutional investors expressing concern about contract stability. Damon realized that the situation had evolved beyond individual accountability to corporate and industry-wide implications. His response needed to address both immediate justice and long-term change. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damon said, standing to address everyone in the first-class cabin, "I want you to understand that what you've witnessed tonight is not an isolated incident. This is the daily experience of countless passengers who look like me who face discrimination on airlines across this country." His voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to boardroom presentations, but the emotion behind it was unmistakably personal. "The difference is that I have the resources to fight back the platform to demand accountability and the business relationships to ensure there are consequences. Most passengers facing discrimination have none of those advantages." Sophia's live stream comments were flowing too fast to read, but the sentiment was clear. Viewers recognized they were witnessing something historic, a moment when discrimination met accountability in real time. Elena Vasquez was now receiving continuous updates from Pacific Airways headquarters. Elena came the voice of CEO Anderson through her earpiece. Our legal team is recommending immediate resolution with full accountability measures. We cannot afford to let this situation continue. Mr. Mitchell, Elena said, addressing Damon directly. Our CEO is requesting immediate conference with you to discuss comprehensive resolution. Are you willing to participate in that conversation? Damon looked around the cabin, taking in the faces of passengers who had witnessed the entire incident. Some showed embarrassment at their initial assumptions. Others displayed anger at the discrimination they'd observed. All of them understood they had been part of something significant. Ms. Vasquez Damon replied, I'm willing to discuss resolution, but any conversation must include concrete commitments to policy changes that will protect future passengers from experiencing what I've experienced tonight. Tyler Anderson raised his hand to speak. Mr. Mitchell, I want to apologize for not speaking up sooner. I knew who you were from the beginning, and I should have intervened immediately. Damon's response was gracious but pointed. Tyler, your hesitation is exactly why discrimination persists. Witnesses who stay silent enable the problem to continue. Dr. Rodriguez added her professional perspective. What we've witnessed tonight will become a case study in how discrimination operates in corporate environments and how individual courage can drive change. Captain Wilson made the announcement that would begin Pacific Airways' formal accountability process. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Pacific Airways, I want to apologize for the unprofessional and discriminatory treatment Mr. Mitchell has experienced. Sarah Collins is hereby suspended from all duties pending investigation. But Damon wasn't finished. His next words would reshape the entire aviation industry's approach to passenger dignity. Captain Wilson's suspension isn't sufficient. This incident demonstrates a pattern of corporate tolerance for discrimination that requires complete restructuring of your employee training, accountability processes, and corporate culture. Elena realized that they were no longer dealing with customer service recovery. They were dealing with a corporate partner who had the power to reshape their entire business operations and was prepared to use that power to drive industry change. The conversation that would transform Pacific Airways was about to begin. Have you ever been told you don't belong somewhere you'd earned the right to be? Share your story in the comments. This community needs to hear it. The conference call with Pacific Airways executive leadership began with CEO Michael Anderson's voice coming through the cabin's communication system, his tone carrying the weight of someone addressing a corporate crisis of unprecedented scope. Mr. Mitchell, this is Michael Anderson, CEO of Pacific Airways. I want to personally apologize for the discriminatory treatment you've experienced aboard our aircraft. What happened tonight is completely unacceptable and does not represent our company's values. Damon's response was measured and professional, but his words carried unmistakable authority. Mr. Anderson, I appreciate your apology, but this incident reveals that your stated values and actual practices are fundamentally different. Discrimination doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when corporate cultures enable and protect it. Sophia's live stream had reached over 100,000 viewers, and major news networks were now interrupting regular programming to cover the story. The hashtag #Seatgate had become a global trending topic, with civil rights organizations, celebrities, and political leaders weighing in on the incident. Tyler Anderson continued documenting everything through his Twitter thread, which had become a primary source for journalists covering the story. Update 1520, Pacific Airways CEO now personally involved in resolution discussions. This has escalated to highest levels of corporate leadership. Elena Vasquez was coordinating multiple communication streams while trying to maintain control of the situation on the aircraft. Her earpiece carried continuous updates from corporate headquarters legal affairs and public relations teams. Elena came the voice of Patricia Williams, Director of Public Relations. Major news outlets are requesting immediate statement. We need resolution or formal response within 30 minutes to prevent complete narrative loss. David Foster, Pacific Airways' legal counsel, provided a more dire assessment. We're looking at potential contract termination, civil rights litigation, and regulatory investigation. This single incident could trigger industry-wide policy reviews. On the aircraft, Dr. Rodriguez had completed her preliminary legal assessment and was prepared to provide testimony about what she'd witnessed. As an attorney specializing in discrimination cases, she announced to the cabin, "I can confirm that tonight's events constitute clear civil rights violations with multiple aggravating factors." Miguel Rodriguez was now in direct communication with his district manager, receiving instructions that would reshape his understanding of corporate accountability. Miguel came the firm voice from headquarters. "You have authorization to take any action necessary to resolve this situation professionally. Sarah Collins' employment is terminated effective immediately." The announcement sent shockwaves through the cabin. Sarah, who had been standing near the galley area, turned pale as she realized her career with Pacific Airways was over. "You can't fire me for enforcing cabin standards," Sarah protested, her voice carrying desperation now rather than authority. Elena's response was decisive and final. "Sarah, you weren't enforcing standards. You were discriminating against a passenger based on appearance, threatening removal without policy justification, and persisting even after learning his professional credentials. Your employment with Pacific Airways is terminated for cause. The legal implications were immediate and severe. Termination for discrimination provided Pacific Airways with some protection against wrongful termination lawsuits while demonstrating corporate accountability for the incident. But Damon wasn't satisfied with individual consequences. His next statement would drive comprehensive reform across the airline industry. "Ms. Vasquez, Mr. Anderson terminating one employee doesn't address the widespread nature of this problem. This incident occurred because your corporate culture tolerates discrimination as long as it doesn't generate formal complaints." CEO Anderson's voice came through the communication system with new urgency. "Mr. Mitchell, what specific actions would you recommend to ensure this type of incident never happens again?" Damon's response revealed the scope of his thinking about corporate accountability and change management. First, immediate implementation of bias recognition training for all customer-facing employees. Second, establishment of real-time monitoring systems to identify and address discriminatory behavior. Third, creation of passenger advocacy positions with authority to intervene in situations like tonight's incident. Jennifer Davis was monitoring the corporate implications in real time. "Mr. Mitchell," she reported through his earpiece, "Pacific Airways stock has dropped 4% in after-hours trading. Major institutional investors are requesting immediate briefings on contract stability and reputation damage." The business implications were massive and immediate. Pacific Airways depended on Mitchell Technology Solutions for critical operational systems, making any disruption to their partnership potentially catastrophic for airline operations. Tyler Anderson provided witness testimony that would be featured in subsequent legal proceedings. "I want to state for the record that Mr. Mitchell behaved professionally throughout this entire incident. He never raised his voice, used profanity, or behaved inappropriately. The only unprofessional behavior came from airline staff." Dr. Rodriguez added her professional assessment. "What we witnessed tonight was textbook discrimination, assumption-based treatment escalation, despite policy compliance and persistence even after identification correction. This will become a case study in civil rights litigation." Sophia's live stream had become the primary source for real-time coverage of the incident. Major news outlets were requesting permission to use her footage, and her viewer engagement had reached levels that would permanently reshape her media career. "I'm watching Pacific Airways terminate an employee in real time," Sophia whispered into her phone. "This is unprecedented accountability for airline discrimination." But Ryan Thompson, who had been quietly observing since his earlier comments, was about to face his own consequences. Mr. Thompson, Elena said, consulting notes from corporate headquarters, your statements during this incident have been reviewed by our customer service team. Your explicit support for discriminatory treatment violates our passenger conduct policies. Ryan's face went pale as he realized his entertainment had become his own nightmare. I was just trying to enjoy a quiet flight. I never intended, Mr. Thompson. Elena interrupted. You explicitly stated that you expected first-class passengers, while indicating Mr. Mitchell didn't qualify based on appearance. You're hereby banned from Pacific Airways pending review of your conduct. The consequence hit Ryan like a physical blow. His business depended on air travel, and being banned from a major airline would significantly impact his professional operations. But Elena wasn't finished announcing consequences. Additionally, our corporate partnership review team will be evaluating all vendor relationships with Thompson Capital to ensure compliance with our dignity and respect standards. Ryan realized that his moment of casual discrimination was about to cost him business relationships worth millions of dollars. Companies increasingly included anti-discrimination clauses in vendor agreements, making his recorded statements potential grounds for contract termination. Captain Wilson took control of the situation with military precision. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed tonight represents a failure of our corporate systems to protect passenger dignity. Effective immediately, Pacific Airways is implementing emergency protocols to prevent future discrimination incidents. Elena provided specific details about immediate changes. We're establishing a passenger advocacy hotline, implementing bias recognition training for all employees, and creating real-time reporting systems for discrimination concerns. Dr. Rodriguez offered to provide expert consultation on policy development. As someone who specializes in discrimination law, I'd be willing to review your proposed policies to ensure they meet legal standards for civil rights protection. Damon recognized that the moment required leadership rather than just accountability. Mr. Anderson, I want to be clear about something. My goal isn't to punish Pacific Airways or damage your business operations. My goal is to ensure that every passenger, regardless of appearance or background, receives the dignity and respect they deserve when they travel. The statement reframed the entire incident from revenge to reform, from punishment to progress. Damon was offering partnership rather than just demanding accountability. Mr. Mitchell Anderson responded, we would welcome the opportunity to work with you on comprehensive reform. Your expertise in technology solutions could help us develop monitoring systems that prevent discrimination before it affects passengers. Tyler Anderson realized he was witnessing corporate accountability in real time. This is how change happens, he posted on Twitter. Not through boycotts or protests, but through powerful people using their platforms to demand better treatment for everyone. Sophia's live stream comments reflected the global audience's recognition that they were witnessing something historic. Viewers were sharing their own discrimination stories, expressing hope for change, and demanding similar accountability from other airlines. Jennifer Davis provided final updates through Damon's earpiece. Sir, we have confirmation of comprehensive policy changes, immediate implementation timelines, and executive partnership agreements. This incident is driving industry-wide reform. Elena Vasquez made the announcement that would conclude the immediate crisis while beginning long-term transformation. Mr. Mitchell, on behalf of Pacific Airways, I want to confirm our commitment to comprehensive reform. We're prepared to make you our partner in developing industry-leading standards for passenger dignity. The applause that followed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was the quiet, sustained recognition from passengers who understood they had witnessed something profound, the transformation of individual discrimination into corporate accountability and industry change. Sarah Collins had been escorted from the aircraft, her career ended by her inability to treat passengers with equal dignity. Ryan Thompson sat in his seat, calculating the business consequences of his casual discrimination. And Damon Mitchell remained in seat 1A where he had belonged from the beginning. If you believe this moment represents real change, not just headlines, share this video with everyone who needs to see that accountability is possible. The Pacific Airways VIP lounge at LAX had been hastily converted into a press conference venue as news outlets from across the country dispatched teams to cover what was being called the most significant airline discrimination incident of the digital age. Within 2 hours of Sophia's live stream reaching viral status, the story had become international news. Damon stood at a podium flanked by Elena Vasquez and Captain Wilson, facing a room filled with reporters, cameras, and aviation industry executives who had rushed to witness the historic moment. Behind them, a large screen displayed the Pacific Airways logo alongside Mitchell Technology Solutions' corporate branding, a visual representation of the partnership that would reshape industry standards. Ladies and gentlemen, Damon began, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had characterized his behavior throughout the incident. What happened on Flight PA482 tonight wasn't just about me. It was about every passenger who has been told they don't belong in spaces they've earned access to. CNN's senior aviation correspondent raised her hand first. Mr. Mitchell, can you walk us through your thoughts during the incident? Were you surprised by the crew's behavior? Damon's response revealed the depth of his experience with discrimination. I wasn't surprised, which is the most troubling aspect of this situation. I've faced similar treatment countless times throughout my career. The difference tonight was that I had the platform to ensure there were consequences and the resources to drive change. Sophia Martinez, now recognized as the citizen journalist who had broken the story, was given priority seating among the media. Her live stream had been viewed over 5 million times, and major news outlets were crediting her coverage with exposing the incident to global audiences. Mr. Mitchell, Sophia asked, "What do you want people to learn from what happened tonight?" "I want people to understand that discrimination persists because witnesses stay silent and institutions avoid accountability. Tonight, passengers spoke up, employees faced consequences, and a corporation committed to comprehensive change. That's the model for progress." Elena Vasquez stepped forward to announce Pacific Airways' immediate response. Effective tomorrow morning, Pacific Airways will implement the most comprehensive anti-discrimination training program in the aviation industry. We're partnering with Mitchell Technology Solutions to develop real-time monitoring systems that will prevent incidents like tonight's from ever happening again. The announcement represented a fundamental shift in how airlines would approach passenger treatment. Technology-driven bias detection, real-time intervention systems, and partnership with discrimination experts would become industry standard within months of the press conference. Tyler Anderson, now recognized as a key witness, was invited to provide testimony about the incident. As someone who knew Mr. Mitchell's identity from the beginning, I want to acknowledge my failure to speak up immediately. That hesitation is exactly why discrimination continues. Witnesses who could stop it choose comfort over courage. His honesty about his own role in enabling discrimination by staying silent resonated with viewers who recognized their own tendencies to avoid confrontation even when witnessing injustice. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez provided legal context that would influence civil rights litigation across the industry. Tonight's incident demonstrates how individual bias becomes institutional discrimination when corporations fail to implement adequate oversight and accountability systems. The legal precedents established here will reshape employment law in customer service industries. Patricia Williams, Pacific Airways Director of Public Relations, announced that the incident had triggered comprehensive review of industry practices across all major airlines. What happened tonight has forced our entire industry to confront uncomfortable truths about how we treat passengers. Change is coming because change is overdue. The press conference was interrupted by a video call from Michael Anderson, Pacific Airways' CEO, who was in emergency meetings with the airline's board of directors. "Mr. Mitchell, I want to publicly apologize not just for tonight's incident, but for the corporate culture that enabled it to happen. We're committed to becoming the industry leader in passenger dignity. Anderson's statement represented more than damage control. It was a commitment to transformation that would cost Pacific Airways millions of dollars in training technology and system implementation, but would position them as leaders in equality and inclusion. Rebecca Chen from Aviation Weekly asked about the business implications. Mr. Mitchell, how will this incident affect your company's relationships with airlines industry-wide? Damon's response revealed his strategic thinking about leveraging the moment for broader change. Mitchell Technology Solutions works with airlines across the world. Tonight's incident will influence how we evaluate potential partnerships. Companies that demonstrate commitment to passenger dignity will receive preferential consideration for our services. The statement sent immediate shockwaves through the aviation industry. Airlines that had been quietly tolerating discriminatory practices suddenly faced the prospect of losing access to critical technology services if they didn't implement comprehensive reform. Social media engagement during the press conference reached unprecedented levels. Seatgate continued trending globally, with millions of people sharing their own experiences of travel discrimination and demanding similar accountability from airlines worldwide. Maya Johnson, the civil rights activist whose social media presence had amplified the story, called in to provide perspective on the historical significance. Tonight represents the kind of accountability that the civil rights movement has fought for decades to achieve. When discrimination meets consequences in real time witnessed by millions of people, it creates momentum for change that can't be reversed. The press conference concluded with Damon's announcement of the Mitchell Foundation's new initiative. Tonight's incident has inspired the creation of a passenger advocacy fund that will provide legal representation for travelers who face discrimination but lack the resources to fight back. No one should have to endure what I experienced without recourse. Elena Vasquez announced Pacific Airways' financial commitment to the initiative. Pacific Airways will be the first major contributor to Mr. Mitchell's Passenger Advocacy Fund, demonstrating our commitment to ensuring equal treatment for all travelers. The announcement represented unprecedented corporate accountability, an airline voluntarily funding legal representation for passengers who might sue them for discrimination. But it also positioned Pacific Airways as a leader in passenger rights advocacy. As the press conference ended, reporters rushed to file stories that would dominate news cycles for days. The incident had become more than viral content. It was a catalyst for industry transformation that would affect millions of travelers worldwide. Sophia Martinez was approached by representatives from major news networks offering her positions as a correspondent specializing in travel equality issues. Her live stream had launched a career in advocacy journalism that would influence transportation policy for years to come. Tyler Anderson was contacted by civil rights organizations seeking his participation in witness testimony for discrimination cases across multiple industries. His honesty about his own hesitation to intervene had made him a powerful spokesperson for bystander responsibility. But the most significant outcome was the immediate policy changes that began implementing across the aviation industry. Airlines worldwide announced bias training programs, passenger advocacy initiatives, and accountability systems designed to prevent discrimination incidents. The press conference marked the beginning of a new era in travel equality, driven by the power of social media documentation, corporate accountability, and individual courage to demand justice. Within 72 hours of the press conference, the aviation industry had begun the most comprehensive transformation in passenger rights policies since the deregulation of the 1970s. The Seatgate incident had created momentum that no airline could afford to ignore. Delta Airlines was the first major carrier to announce comprehensive changes implementing what they called the Passenger Dignity Protocol within 48 hours of Damon's press conference. CEO David Harrison issued a statement acknowledging that the events aboard Pacific Airways have forced our entire industry to confront behaviors we should have addressed years ago. United Airlines followed within hours, announcing partnership with the NAACP to develop bias recognition training for all customer-facing employees. Their statement specifically referenced the Mitchell incident. No passenger should have to prove they belong in a seat they've purchased, regardless of their appearance or background. American Airlines went further, announcing the creation of passenger advocacy positions at major hubs, employees specifically trained to intervene in situations where discrimination might be occurring. The announcement included a direct quote from Damon's press conference: "Witnesses who stay silent enable discrimination to continue." Southwest Airlines, known for its casual corporate culture, announced the most comprehensive changes of all major carriers. They established real-time bias monitoring systems developed in partnership with technology companies, creating the first industry-wide discrimination prevention network. Jennifer Davis had become the architect of transformation coordinating between Mitchell Technology Solutions and airlines worldwide to implement monitoring systems that would prevent discrimination before it affected passengers. Her secure communication center now tracked passenger treatment patterns across multiple airlines, identifying potential bias incidents in real time. The technology we're implementing goes beyond simple complaint tracking, Jennifer explained to Aviation Week reporter Rebecca Chen. We're using behavioral pattern analysis to identify discriminatory treatment before it escalates to the level of what Mr. Mitchell experienced. The Federal Aviation Administration announced a comprehensive review of passenger rights policies with Administrator Sarah Johnson, stating that the Mitchell incident has demonstrated gaps in our oversight that require immediate attention. Congress requested testimony from Damon about discrimination in transportation industries. Senator Maria Rodriguez, chairwoman of the Transportation Committee, announced hearings that would examine patterns of bias that affect millions of American travelers. The international response was equally significant. The International Air Transport Association issued new guidelines for passenger treatment, specifically citing the Pacific Airways incident as evidence that discrimination in aviation affects global reputation and requires coordinated response. European airlines announced adoption of American anti-discrimination training programs, with several carriers hiring civil rights consultants to review their policies. The incident had become a global catalyst for change in passenger treatment standards. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, the civil rights attorney who had witnessed the incident, was recruited by the ACLU to lead a new transportation equality initiative. What happened to Mr. Mitchell was wrong, but his response has created opportunities for change that will protect millions of future passengers, she said in her first interview since the incident. Pacific Airways had become the unexpected leader in passenger rights advocacy. Elena Vasquez was promoted to Vice President of Passenger Advocacy, overseeing implementation of the industry's most comprehensive anti-discrimination program. "We're not just changing policies," Vasquez explained to CNN. "We're changing culture. Every employee now understands that passenger dignity is not negotiable, regardless of personal biases or assumptions." The training programs developed through Pacific Airways' partnership with Mitchell Technology Solutions became the industry standard. Role-playing exercises, bias recognition software, and real-time intervention protocols were adopted by airlines worldwide. Miguel Rodriguez, the shift supervisor who had finally acted to stop Sarah's discrimination, became a trainer for the new programs. His experience witnessing discrimination escalate unchecked made him a powerful advocate for early intervention. "I learned that neutrality in the face of discrimination is really complicity," Miguel said during training sessions. "When you see bias affecting passenger treatment, you have to act immediately, not hope someone else will handle it." The economic impact was substantial, but overwhelmingly positive for airlines that embraced change quickly. Pacific Airways reported increased passenger satisfaction scores and significant improvement in social media sentiment within weeks of implementing new policies. Companies that hesitated faced immediate consequences. 2 regional airlines lost major corporate accounts after clients cited concern about discrimination policies. The business case for equality had become undeniable. Sofia Martinez had become a leading voice in travel equality advocacy, her social media platform now focusing on transportation justice issues. Her coverage of the Mitchell incident had launched a career in investigative journalism that influenced policy development across multiple industries. That night, on Flight PA 482, changed my understanding of the power of citizen journalism, Sofia said in her first network television interview. Sometimes the most important stories happen in real time, and we all have the ability to ensure they're documented and shared. Tyler Anderson used his technology industry connections to develop bias monitoring applications that were adopted by transportation companies worldwide. His guilt about initially staying silent had motivated him to create technological solutions for bystander intervention. I was a witness to discrimination who almost stayed silent, Tyler explained during a tech conference presentation. The apps we're developing help people recognize bias and provide tools for safe intervention when they witness unfair treatment. The Mitchell Foundation's Passenger Advocacy Fund had received over $50 million in contributions within a month of its announcement. Airlines, corporate partners, and individual donors had created a resource that would provide legal representation for discrimination victims across all transportation industries. Ryan Thompson faced the full consequences of his casual discrimination. Thompson Capital lost 3 major investors who cited his recorded statements as evidence of bias that violated their diversity and inclusion requirements. His business had shrunk by 60% within weeks of the incident. I had no idea that a few thoughtless comments would destroy my business relationships, Ryan said in his only public statement since the incident. I'm seeking education about unconscious bias and hoping to rebuild trust in the business community. Sarah Collins had been unable to find employment with any major airline as her termination for discrimination had become industry-wide knowledge. She eventually found work in customer service outside the aviation industry and was reportedly undergoing bias recognition training. The transformation extended beyond airlines to hotels, rental car companies, and other travel-related businesses. The travel industry recognized that discrimination incidents could become viral disasters that required proactive prevention rather than reactive damage control. Major hotel chains announced bias training programs modeled on airline initiatives. Rental car companies implemented real-time monitoring systems. The entire hospitality industry was responding to the precedent established by Damon's experience and Pacific Airways' response. The legal implications continued expanding as well. Employment lawyers reported increased demand for discrimination policy reviews from companies across multiple industries. The Mitchell incident had created new legal standards for corporate accountability and individual responsibility. What had begun as one man facing discrimination in an airplane seat had become a catalyst for industry transformation that would affect millions of travelers for decades to come. 6 months after the incident that had changed the aviation industry forever, Damon Mitchell walked through LAX toward his gate, observing the transformation his experience had triggered. The airport felt different, not just in its posted anti-discrimination policies, but in the behavior of employees who had been trained to recognize and prevent bias before it affected passengers. He was flying Pacific Airways again, not because he had to, but because he wanted to witness the changes firsthand. The airline that had once allowed him to be discriminated against had become the industry leader in passenger dignity advocacy. As Damon approached the gate, he was approached by Maria Santos, the teacher who had witnessed the original incident with her 12-year-old daughter. Mr. Mitchell, Maria said, her voice carrying warmth and gratitude. I wanted to thank you for what you did that night. My daughter learned something important about standing up for what's right. The little girl, now 13, stepped forward with the confidence that comes from seeing adults take meaningful action against injustice. My mom says you didn't just fight for yourself, but for everyone who gets treated unfairly when they travel. Damon smiled, recognizing the profound impact that moments of courage can have on young people who are still forming their understanding of justice and advocacy. Your mom is right. But the real lesson is that change happens when ordinary people decide they won't accept injustice even when it's uncomfortable to speak up. At the gate, he encountered Elena Vasquez, who had been promoted to Vice President of Passenger Advocacy after leading Pacific Airways transformation. "Mr. Mitchell," Elena said, "I wanted to update you on our progress. We've had 0 confirmed discrimination incidents since implementing our new monitoring systems. The technology developed through their partnership had become the gold standard across the industry. Real-time bias detection, immediate intervention protocols, and comprehensive accountability systems had virtually eliminated discriminatory treatment from Pacific Airways flights. More importantly," Elena continued, "we've trained over 15,000 employees in bias recognition and intervention techniques. The culture change has been remarkable. Employees now see themselves as advocates for passenger dignity rather than enforcers of arbitrary standards." Damon reflected on how individual courage had catalyzed institutional transformation. His decision to activate Protocol 9 had triggered changes that now protected millions of passengers who would never know his name or understand how their travel experience had been improved by his willingness to demand accountability. Boarding the aircraft, Damon was greeted by flight attendant Marcus Williams, who had witnessed the original incident and had since become a trainer for Pacific Airways bias prevention programs. "Mr. Mitchell, it's an honor to serve you today. I want you to know that every day I'm reminded of the lesson you taught us about treating every passenger with dignity." As Damon settled into Seat 1A, the same seat he had been told he didn't belong in 6 months earlier, he received a message on his phone from Sofia Martinez, whose coverage had made the incident impossible to ignore. Sofia had been hired by CNN as their transportation equality correspondent and was traveling the country documenting the changes inspired by the Seatgate incident. "Mr. Mitchell," her message read, "I'm at Denver International reporting on their new passenger advocacy training program. The instructor specifically mentioned your incident as the catalyst for industry-wide change. Your courage that night has protected millions of travelers who will never know your name." Tyler Anderson had sent a similar message from a technology conference in Austin, where he was presenting bias detection software to transportation companies worldwide. "The apps we developed after witnessing your experience are now being used by airlines, hotels, and rental car companies globally. Your willingness to speak up has prevented discrimination for countless travelers." Dr. Amanda Rodriguez had become the leading expert on transportation discrimination law, frequently cited in legal cases and policy discussions. Her witness testimony from the original incident had established legal precedents that strengthened civil rights protections across multiple industries. The Mitchell Foundation's Passenger Advocacy Fund had provided legal representation to over 200 travelers who faced discrimination but lacked resources to fight back. What had begun as Damon's personal experience of bias had become a comprehensive support system for vulnerable passengers nationwide. Jennifer Davis had been promoted to Chief Technology Officer for Passenger Advocacy Systems, overseeing implementation of bias monitoring technology across major airlines worldwide. Her secure communication center now prevented discrimination incidents that would have gone unchallenged in previous years. Captain Wilson approached Damon's seat during the boarding process, carrying the dignity that comes from having taken the right action during a moment of crisis. "Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to thank you for your patience that night and for the transformation your experience has created. Flying has become more dignified for everyone because of your courage." As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Damon looked around the first-class cabin and reflected on how much had changed. The same seats, the same configuration, but a completely different culture of respect and inclusion. No passenger would be asked to justify their presence based on appearance. No employee would be allowed to discriminate without immediate consequences. An elderly gentleman across the aisle leaned over and said quietly, "Young man, I don't know if anyone has told you this, but what you did that night made traveling better for my granddaughters. They're young black women starting their careers, and they shouldn't have to face what you experienced." The comment reminded Damon of why he had chosen accountability over accommodation that night. Individual acts of courage create ripple effects that protect future generations from experiencing the same injustices. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, Damon received a final message that summarized the impact of his experience. It came from Maya Johnson, the civil rights activist whose social media platform had amplified the story globally. Mr. Mitchell, I'm at the NAACP convention where transportation equality is a major theme this year. Panel after panel references the Seatgate incident as proof that individual courage can drive institutional change. Your experience has become a case study in how to transform discrimination into justice. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came in a letter from Harold and Margaret Thompson, the elderly couple whose initial support for discrimination had transformed into advocacy for equality after witnessing Damon's dignity under pressure. Dear Mr. Mitchell, their letter read, "We want to apologize for our initial reaction that night and thank you for showing us how wrong our assumptions were. We've since volunteered with passenger advocacy organizations because we learned that silence in the face of discrimination is complicity with injustice." Their transformation from passive enablers of bias to active advocates for equality represented the kind of change that extends far beyond policy implementation to genuine shifts in consciousness and behavior. As the flight continued smoothly toward its destination, Damon reflected on the journey from discrimination to transformation. He hadn't sought to become a symbol of passenger rights advocacy, but his willingness to demand dignity had created change that would protect countless travelers for decades to come. The seat he occupied 1A was the same seat he'd been told he didn't deserve 6 months earlier. But now it represented something larger proof that individual courage supported by institutional accountability can transform unfair treatment into lasting justice. Looking out the window at the landscape passing below, Damon understood that his experience had become part of a larger story about progress, dignity, and the power of speaking truth to injustice. The flight was smooth, the service was professional, and every passenger was treated with the respect they deserved. It was exactly how air travel should be. The transformation sparked by one night aboard Pacific Airways Flight PA-482 continued expanding far beyond the aviation industry. Hotels, restaurants, rental car companies, and countless other service industries implemented bias monitoring and accountability systems inspired by the Seatgate incident. Damon Mitchell had returned to focusing on his technology company's growth, but his experience had permanently changed how Mitchell Technology Solutions evaluated corporate partnerships. Companies with strong diversity and inclusion practices received preferential consideration, creating business incentives for treating all customers with dignity. Sarah Collins eventually found work in customer service outside the aviation industry and completed comprehensive bias recognition training. Her story became a powerful example of how personal prejudices can destroy careers when they translate into discriminatory actions. She never worked for an airline again, but her experience became part of training programs that helped other employees recognize and address their own unconscious biases. If this story reminds you that one voice can change everything, subscribe for more stories of courage, dignity, and justice. And remember, respect shouldn't depend on appearance, wealth, or assumptions. It should depend on our shared humanity. The legacy of Flight PA-482 wasn't just about one man claiming his rightful seat. It was about creating a world where every passenger, regardless of their background or appearance, could travel with the confidence that they belonged wherever their ticket placed them. Hit that like button if you believe discrimination has no place in 2025. Share this video with someone who needs to see that accountability is possible. And subscribe because stories like this remind us that change happens when people refuse to accept injustice. True change happens when individual courage meets institutional accountability witnessed by people willing to document unfairness and demand better treatment for everyone. Damon Mitchell's quiet refusal to accept discrimination had created transformation that would protect travelers for generations to come. Justice doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes through the steady insistence that dignity is not negotiable, that respect is not conditional, and that equality is not a privilege to be granted, but a right to be protected. On that November night in 2025, in Seat 1A of a Pacific Airways flight, one man's courage reminded the world that change is possible when someone decides they've had enough. The flight had landed safely. The passengers had disembarked. But the journey toward true equality in air travel was just beginning. What's your story? Have you ever had to prove you belonged somewhere you'd earned the right to be? Share it in the comments below and let this community know they're not alone. Together we can make sure incidents like this become impossible to ignore and impossible to repeat.